It's time for our Live Well feature. From the 9th to the 15th is a Sexual Health Week, and we're asking the important question today. When was the last time you tested for an STI? In fact,
we're
the
waiting.
more appropriate question is, have you ever tested for an STI? Because there's so many of them. According to the World Health Organization, over 1 million STIs are contracted every single day, most of them silently. While on the African continent, STIs remain a significant public health concern, yet the conversation mainly is shrouded in stigma, silence, and shame. We break down essential reasons why STI testing should be a routine part of our self-care, whether or not we notice any symptoms. That's the tricky part, right? Dr. Anthony Ayayi is joining us back. Dr. Ayayi is a friend of the show, a research scientist at the African Population and Health Research Center. Doctor, welcome back. How's Kenya today?
Thank you for having me. Kenya is warm. We just passed through the winter period, so the weather is really good.
Thank goodness.
Sunny.
We feel the same way here in Joburg. The sun is out and that winter is gone. So we are in the same zone, right? All right, let's talk about STIs. I feel with stuff like this, you always have to define it because that's where we kind of set a good foundation. Doctor, help us define these STIs.
Yeah, sexually transmitted diseases, are quite common. As you indicated in the statistics, over 1 million STIs are contracted on a daily basis. So what are sexually transmitted diseases? I guess the popular one is HIV, but there are other ones like chlamydia, gonorrhea, just to mention a few.
I mean, how do they manifest themselves is the also interesting stuff, because I think when it comes to HIV and AIDS, it gives us kind of a clue of how STIs or STDs work. Most of the time, you don't know they're there until a particular point you feel like it manifesting as a symptom, right? So how do you know that you need to have an STI test? Or maybe the real question is that you'll never know.
No, STI manifests differently. From a man to a woman. Some are symptomatic, which is really why it's important to test, because some do not just show any signs. Maybe even HPV, for example, some can carry it and be able to transmit it without actually having any signs and symptoms. But of course, for some, there are symptoms of STIs that one may experience, which include itching. Again, itching might not mean you have an STI, but maybe it's important to test. Yes. You could have some physical signs, redness, or even discharge that smells that smells horribly compared to the normal the smell you notice. Mm-hmm. So those are examples of symptoms that might keep you worried. But also it's important that when you're with a new partner that you test, irrespective of whether you do not have STI or the partner do not have any physical symptoms, it's still important that you carry out a test.
Yeah.
Just to be sure, because some are symptomatic, as I did mention.
One of the biggest issues with this conversation, Dr. Ayayi, is that, yes, I guess we know that we have to test, but many of us don't know what we have to test for. And outside of HIV and maybe some of those that we've heard more commonly in the grapevine, like gonorrhea or syphilis, I feel like many people don't actually know the variety of STIs that exist. What are some of the most, I don't want to say popular, but those that people are more likely to have even throughout your lifetime? And maybe we should know and start naming these STIs before we even go into testing, because we were speaking about something that many people don't even know how to name or don't know what they are.
Yes. There are quite a number of STIs that are not as popular. but they are common. Chlamydia, for example, it's a common STI. In fact, I was looking at a study this morning that shows that the prevalence of chlamydia could be as high as 7%. It's even more common than gonorrhea, for example.
Wow.
There is also that chlamydia is very common.
Okay,
Syphilis is
I
also
want us to
another
slow down a
example.
little bit, because I mean, even chlamydia itself, you're saying it's very common, but I don't think a lot of people
Yeah.
actually even know what it is. So as you're naming them, perhaps you can give us a quick, brief breakdown of what exactly those STIs are.
Yeah, so as I said previously, chlamydia is it's a bacterial infection. It's treatable. It's one of the most common STIs globally, and of course, it could be acquired through, you know, vaginal sex, oral sex, or anal sex as well. And many people don't often know that they have chlamydia because it's often silent. Um, it might not have symptoms, but of course, the symptoms can also range from throat infection if acquired through oral sex, or rectal infection. There might be plain discharge, bleeding, burning when urinating. Even penile discharge can also be an indication of chlamydia, especially in men. Yeah. Pain during sex, low abdominal pain. All of these are indication for chlamydia. However, if it's left untreated, it could also, result in infertility. So it's just really, really common, and it's sometimes often silent in that people might not even have some physical symptoms.
Mm-hmm. I mean, we can't list all of these because there's so many of them. But where do we go, right? Because the big stigma is already when you think about going for an HIV or AIDS test, you're thinking about, hey, do I go to a clinic and the clinic is around my community? What are these people going to think about me while I test positive? There's so many stigmas around STIs or STDs. And maybe that's where the problem is, that people don't know where to start going to test for the variety of these STIs.
No, I think it's the test is available in most clinics, so it's just easy to include it as part of your regular annual checkup
Okay.
in clinic. So it's not except you have symptoms. You can test when there's a symptoms, but also you can also just test once in a year, and then you can test when you have a new partner. But simply by indicating that you need to test for common STIs, there are tests that can accommodate. They just take sample and then you're able to test for different tests all in one. So they can do HIV test by just taking blood sample and then include syphilis, chlamydia, and HPV, because those are the common ones. Hepatitis as well is also one of the common ones as well that we should be worried about.
Okay, Doctor, let's take a break. We'll come back and deal with this. You've made it kind of very accessible in terms of understanding them. And because there's so many of them, I like the fact that you can just go for a clinic test and you can say, I want an STI test, and it can be a comprehensive test, right? Dr. Ayayi, we've got so many questions around this one. Even if you do test positive of an STI, what are the things that you can do to live in a healthier way? Most of the time when we find out we do have an STI, we don't even tell our partners because of the stigma and the shame around it. What's our responsibility if you do test positively of an STI? It's 20 minutes past 11 o'clock. Stay there on the line, Dr. Ayayi, or we'll come back to you after this break.
Ukatili wa kijinsia unaharibu maisha na kutenga jamii. Hutokea nyumbani, shuleni, kazini na mara nyingi kwa ukimya. Lakini hauwezi kuendelea. Ukiona, ongea. Ikiwa unaumia, funguka, kwa sababu kutofanya lolote sio chaguo. Sikiliza vituo vyote 19 vya redio kuanzia Jumatano ya tarehe 23 Julai kwenye mijadala, ushauri, tamthilia, maonyesho ya elimu na mahojiano na wataalamu. wataalam, manusura, watunga sheria na nchi nzima iliyoathirika na ukatili wa kijinsia kwenye vituo vyako pendwa vya redio. Piga simu 0800-428-428 ili kuripoti unyanyasaji au kupata msaada. GBV na wewe. Ujumbe huu umeletwa kwenu na shirika la SABC.
Call us on +27 63 406 9126 and contribute to the conversation.
We're asking you on our On the Move poll on X at Channel Africa 1. What's the biggest barrier to routine STI testing in Africa? Is it the stigma and shame? Is it the cost and access? Is it a lack of awareness or a fear of results? Let us know. We want you to join this particular conversation as we continue speaking about STI testing, why it should be a routine part of our self-care, and whether or not you notice any symptoms, the importance of this thereof. Dr. Anthony Ayayi continues to join us on this conversation. He's a research scientist at the African Population Health Research Center in Kenya. Dr. Ayayi, let's speak a little bit about the stigma, because it's not just about the health cases of STIs. Whether or not you can just present at any clinic and get an STI test sounds easy enough, but what isn't easy is what's really holding us back, and that's the stigma of STIs. The biggest being that if you present with an STI, you have shameful sexual behavior and you're not a good person, and you are not deserving of good things or maybe even love like most people are. These emotional barriers are holding back the health barriers of STI testing, aren't they?
That is true. Aside from maybe cost, I think the biggest barrier to accessing the STI test is stigma, as you rightly put it. And it's the stigma is actually as a result of people blaming someone for contracting STI. They typically, will label such person as promiscuous, whereas that's not the case. STIs you can contract STI whether you are promiscuous or not. It's not exclusive for only people that are promiscuous. That's certainly not the case. And we need to destigmatize it, because in a way we do not blame people for having diabetes, for example. So it's easy to say, I want to have my blood pressure checked, and if you have high blood pressure, people don't blame you for having high blood pressure, for example. So I don't see why people should be blamed for having contracted a sexually transmitted infection.
Mm-hmm.
As you know, you might do everything right and still contract STI. It doesn't mean that you are dirty or that you are promiscuous or sleeping around at all.
Could you clarify that, Dr. Ayayi, because you don't want people thinking that that their partners are sleeping around, or maybe even the fact that they are not sleeping around. So I think we've skipped that step of how you actually contract STIs.
Yeah, I mean, STIs are common, as we did mention earlier at the beginning of the show, that it's really common. And these things are highly transmissible through oral sex, for example, through vaginal sex, anal sex. And because we have a lot of these bacteria or viruses circulating in the population, even for people that take the greatest of caution, they might still contract some of these STIs.
In what other ways that are non-sexual then can you contract an STI?
Blood transfusion, for example, is one of the ways, although most hospitals now take great care in screening the blood before they transfuse it to others. But of course, if you have contact with another person's blood, whether it's through sex or not, you can contract an STI. So although those are ways that people may contract STI, but not the common ways. Of course, most of these STIs are still contracted through sex, for example. whether it's oral sex or anal or vaginal sex. But the reality is, it's possible that you contract it if you exchange bodily fluids or blood with another person that is a carrier.
You know, there is something that is quite dangerous that could be an effect of not, doing these regular testing that we're speaking about. And that is STIs that are dormant. I think many of us obviously walk around thinking, it couldn't be me. I probably don't have an STI, which also is another barrier from people wanting to go test because like, no, I'm fine. I've been fine all my life. So there's nothing wrong. Even when we come across new partners and we have that conversation, which doesn't usually happen. But when it does, it's like, no, don't worry, I'm fine. I don't have anything. How dangerous is a dormant STI in our bodies?
Dormant STI might, for someone that is a carrier but do not have symptoms, they might not be sick, so they might just be fine. But the risk is that they can transmit it to someone who they may transmit this to someone, and it might actually have negative consequence on the person that is transmitted to. So if you're a carrier of a particular STI, maybe it's important to also inform your partner so that you take necessary caution to prevent transmitting it. And I think it's really, really important because some are asymptomatic, and that makes it more dangerous for people that depend on only physical signs to assess whether their partner is carrying a sexually transmitted disease. There might just not be any physical sign that someone might have that STI. So the best thing is to test just to be sure. And then in case there are you are positive, I think it's important to take caution. To complete your treatment because typically most of these STIs are treatable. So you complete your treatment and then inform your partner, stay away from sex during the time you're on treatment and complete your treatment, and then get tested again to be sure that you are cleared before you engage in unprotected sex. And it's important to just adopt safer practices. You can condomize, and then be faithful to your regular partner as well, and because to minimize your risk.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about treatment. I'm sure treatments looks different for the different STIs, right?
Absolutely. So the treatments would probably take between a week to 2 weeks for most of these STIs. And again, it's always good to talk to your doctor and not not listen to treatment online. It's important that your treatment is tailored to your need, the dosage, because there's a lot of things that you will want to look before prescribing medication to a patient, including other medications you are using, including whether you have chronic diseases that you are treating and all of this. All of this will help doctors to tailor the treatments for your own needs. So I think it's extremely important to get tested and then get a doctor to recommend recommendations as tailored to your needs. That's usually what it takes. But within 2 weeks to 3 weeks at most, you should be able to complete all the treatment for all of these, except for maybe HIV that might require longer term treatment because there's no cure really.
Well, I will have to leave it there, Dr. Ayayi. I think it's fantastic that we're having these conversations and that encouragement for people to test just as regularly as they do for any other thing. Maybe like if you have a flu, you don't actually have to have a flu to test, because at the end of the day, if you are someone who is sexually active, it's not just your own life that's at risk, but also the lives of your partners that you claim to love. So it's not just something that is beneficial for one, but beneficial for everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. It's always a pleasure to have you, and thank you for educating us this morning.
Thank you very much for having me, and I'm glad to be part of the conversation.
Thank you. That's Dr. Anthony Ayayi, research scientist at the African Population and Health Research Center, speaking about STI testing and why it should be a routine in your life.